Hi everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to cover half of lecture 12 and we will finish it next week. Lecture 12 talks about monopoly. So anything we do starting from lecture 12 till the end of May or till the end of April and the first week of May will be covered in your midterm 3 exams. So I hope your midterm 2 was well and you guys were happy with it, but anything that we do from today up to the end of this class will be included in your third exam, which is I think on the second week of May. So anyways, last class we learned about that we knew before the midterm we knew that there are four different types of market structure, and we learned in details how the perfect competition or the pure competition firms operate in an industry. So today we are going to look into another type of market structure which is called monopoly. Okay, so monopoly, basically the characteristics of a monopoly market structure are as follows. A market structure, and it is the market structure where there is no competition. Basically there is only one producer. So let's say if I am in the market producing leather jacket for the 30 of you and there's no one else producing leather jackets, then I have no competition and I am the only producers. So anytime you guys need leather jackets, you will come to me. You don't have any other option. So basically I am the single producer and I'm one producer. Now the second characteristic is there is no substitute product, right? Because again, when I am producing leather jackets, it means probably in that class there is no substitute available for leather jackets. Nobody else, so nobody else is producing woolen jackets, or nobody else is producing a shawl to cover your body. So basically there is no substitute product. Under a monopoly market structure there is only one producer and there is no substitute product, so people or consumers do not have any options to switch to other producers or switch to other type of products. They are stuck with one product and the producer basically produces that single product and there is no other substitute product. The third is the producer has considerable control over price. Now you can understand that I am the only producer and I know I don't have any substitute and I know I am your only choice, so that means I can control my price, right? Either you can get it or you don't want it, or you can't get it, right? So as a supplier, as a producer, I have control over the price. The fourth characteristic is we do marketing of our product. The monopoly firms will do marketing of the product through public relations. So they have a separate department called public relations and they do the marketing. If you think about perfect competition, there was no marketing because the products are identical, so I don't have to market, and the market price is also the same for everyone in the all the firms in the industry, right? So there's no need to market. There's nothing special about my product that consumers need to know, whereas in this case I am the only producers and I use a public relations department to market my product so it's more attractive to the consumers. Okay, and then lastly there is high barriers to entry into the market, meaning that if I am operating in this type of industry, it's very hard for any one of you to enter the market, probably because the cost is very high. The cost of investments to enter the or start the business is very high, so that's why the barriers to entry is very high. Some examples of monopoly will be a utility firm within a county or within a city, like in the place where I live. Let's say I'm in McKinney, the part of McKinney I live in, we only have one electric provider, and that's CoServe, the company CoServe. There is no other electric company options available to us. So that would be an example of monopoly in McKinney. Or let's say in Plano, in East Plano, Spectrum is the only internet service provider. No other companies can provide internet. So that's also a monopoly. Then there are some drug firms that are monopoly as well. So basically the characteristics of monopoly is there's no competition, there is only one producer, there's no substitute product, producers have a lot of control over price, there's high barriers to entry, and producers do marketing through public relations department. Moving on to the next slide. So basically, because there is high cost to enter the market, competitors cannot enter. So competitors are blocked, and therefore the farm that is operating in the industry will enjoy decreasing average cost and economies of scale with increasing volumes. Okay, so basically if the farm produces more, they will enjoy decreasing average cost as well as enjoy economies of scale, and then there's no competitors coming in. There's also a term called natural monopoly. Natural monopoly exists where production has substantial economies of scale, okay, and it is sometimes present in public utilities, allowed by the government. Again, the electric utility company I was talking about, it's allowed by the government. There's only one supplier in the market, and it is done in order to maintain low average total cost. If there are more people, or if there are more suppliers coming into this market, then average total cost probably is going to go up. So it does not make sense. That's why government protects natural monopoly, because the farm is at lowest average total cost. Also think about the DART bus or public transportation. If government only assigns the company DART to provide public transportation in the Dallas area, that means they are at the lowest average total cost. Now, if there is another type of bus service that comes in and starts competing, then their cost will go up, and they won't be basically, in that case, the average total cost for both the firms will go up. So that doesn't make sense. So let me do a graph and show you in the short run how the average total cost curve looks like usually. So let's say this is a different type of curve, and on the x-axis we have quantity, and on the y-axis we have average total cost. Okay, and for a firm, for the monopoly industry, the short run average total cost curve looks like this. So in this case, Q1 is the amount of output produced by farm 1. Okay, Q2 is when there's 2 farms, and Q3 is when there is 3 farms. And if you see, only in this scenario, if there is only 1 farm, then you are producing the maximum quantity, and your average total cost is actually lower. So let's say this is 3, this is, let's say, 4, and this is, let's say, 5. So these are the points, right? So if you compare the points, this is the lowest point, and the output is also maximum. So that's a natural monopoly, because the average cost is lowest. Now if people are coming in, if there's more competition, your average cost is going up, and at the same time output is going down, which is not good. So you see, it's here in this slide, it says in the short run average total cost curve, society will only allow 1 producer. Because it makes sense, right? In this type of industry, the society will only allow 1 producer, because the output is maximum and average cost is minimum. If we have 2 producers, we would have operated at Q2 and average cost of 4, which means it goes up. And if we had 3 producers, then we would have produced at Q3, which is even lower output, and average cost would be 5, even higher average outputs. So as more producers are added in this scenario, the average total cost goes up and efficiency is reduced because lack of economies of scale. So under such conditions, a monopoly will lead to a lower prices. Basically, when we have a natural monopoly that's enjoying economies of scale, then we will have lower prices, right? This is natural monopoly. Now don't compare the don't think it's different from a normal monopoly. Natural monopoly is something that's created by naturally, and it's basically the government is protecting it so that they can produce at low prices and at low average total cost. Now, what are the factors that causes the monopoly in a market? So there are several factors that causes monopoly in the factors. Number 1 is legal barriers. Legal barrier is one of the main reasons why we have a monopoly in a market structure. Okay, so an example of this would be, if you go back to the slide, it says government grants monopoly status to farms through copyrights, patents, licenses, and trademarks. So let's say if I innovate something, let's say I am the innovator of the drug that treats coronavirus. Okay, now government will give me trademark, or government will give me the license for that So I am protected so that I can continue my work, so that I can increase my output and lower my cost, and I don't have any competition from outside people. Oh, so that's one thing, when government provides the protections through various types of licenses, patents, copyrights, and trademarks in order to protect an innovation or invention, then that refers to legal barriers, and that creates monopoly. Now, these protection government usually provides for a set period of time, maybe a 1 year or maybe 1.5 years or 2 years. Then after that, it opens up. Once the firm, let's say once the inventing firm stabilizes and is good, they are done with their research and design, and the drug is good to go or the product is good to go, and then everyone likes the product in the market, then the government will open up the legal barriers so other firms can join in now, and then there's competition, and then it becomes a more efficient market. But initially, legal barriers by the government can create monopoly. Now, another thing that can cause monopoly is ownership of essential resources. Now, if some firms have control over certain natural resources, let's say a firm can have a lot of oil, like they own a lot of oil, okay, or a firm may own a lot of highly skilled engineers. So in those cases, if they own natural resources which are limited in quantity, in those cases, that firm has an advantage over the other competitors. So they will be able to charge higher prices, and they will be able to produce better quality products, and therefore they will be able to operate as a monopoly. And this is exactly what happened in the aluminum industry. There were some firms that only had, or there was one or two firms that had control of aluminum, so they were the monopoly in the market structure. Okay, then another thing is called, or another factor that causes monopoly is unfair competition. Okay, now if I'm already in the market as and operating as a monopoly, and I see other firms are trying to get in, then I will engage in various type of unfair means in order to stop them from coming into the market. And an example would be dumping. When I see other firms are trying to come in and enter my market, I will engage in dumping. Means that I will sell my products below my cost of production for a short time. For a short time I can incur some losses, but I will make it up once that competition goes away. So that's one way. Dumping is one way, and it's not right, it's not legal. So that's one way I can drive off competition. And the other way I can do it is reciprocation arrangement. That's another way I can create unfair competition, which eventually causes the competitors to leave the industry. Now, when I say reciprocation arrangement, what that means is, let's say when firm A, when the new firm entering into the industry, they are forced to buy the raw materials from me in order to sell to firm B. Okay, so basically I will be probably charging them high prices, so their cost of production is higher for the raw materials, and as a result they will go out of business because I will be charging lower prices than them. So these are some methods. Dumping and reciprocation arrangements are unfair means of competition that drives off competitors out of the industry now and creates monopoly situations. However, these business practices are anti-competitive and they are violation of the law, like especially the Sherman Antitrust Act that was passed in the 1890. This was done basically to stop these means, the dumping, reciprocation arrangements, in order to break the monopoly so that there is more competition. And in the 1890s, the steel industry, the aluminum industry, the railway industry, those were monopoly. So these laws were passed in order to make sure that there is more competition into the market. And then one last factor that causes a monopoly or can create a monopoly situation is economies of being established. Okay, so when a firm gains an economic benefit, compared to other firms, if one firm gains an economic benefit, they can have monopoly power by simply being in business longer or being better known than competitors. So if I have been producing leather jackets for the last 20 years and someone else is now coming in and trying to make leather jackets, consumers already know my brand, consumers already know the name of my company, they are used to my leather jackets. They don't know the quality or the type of leather jackets the new firm is going to produce. So because of this, the fact that I have been present in the market structure for a long period of time and created a better name and trademark, that gives me a power, a monopoly power over the competitors, and that basically ultimately creates monopoly. So monopoly power is greater the more perceived uniqueness of the product is. So the more unique my product is, and the more that's very very different from the others, the more monopoly power I will have over the others. So basically these are the factors that cause a monopoly in a market structure. So again, legal barriers, then ownership of essential natural resources, then unfair competition, and economies of being established. These are the four factors that can cause a monopoly in a market structure. Now, why do we study monopoly? In reality, there is only a couple of industries that are monopoly, and why is it necessary to study monopoly? It is necessary is because the analysis is very important to judge the behavior of farms that are very close to monopoly. There are some farms that are very close to monopoly, and using these methods or using this analysis, we can understand how those farms are operating and how those farms are making profits. So, farms with more than 15% of the market share can often be explained in part through monopoly market power. So, if in an industry, let's say there are only three market or three farms, let's say in an industry, let's say we are in the production of leather jackets, let's say me, Patrick, and Fernanda, we are in the leather production market, and let's say I have 85% share, Fernanda has 10%, and Patrick has 5% market share, then that means I am the main producer in the market. I have the most market power. And that market we can refer to as a monopoly, because that type of market structure behaves very similar to a monopoly market structure, and it's very important to see how these firms operate. Now, for a monopoly, the cost structures are very similar, or is the same as the perfect competition when we saw it. Basically the relationship between fixed cost, variable cost, marginal cost, and average cost are the same as competition, as a pure competition firm. So if you remember, when we were looking at the cost structures, quantity, cost, if you remember, the marginal cost curve looks like this. This is your average variable cost curve. This is your average total cost curve. This is for monopoly, and the same thing was applicable for a perfectly competitive firm. So the cost structure remains the same, and basically the marginal cost curve intersects the average cost curve. The marginal cost curve intersects the average total cost curve and the average variable cost curve at the minimum points. Okay, so it's the same as the farm operating in a perfect competition model. However, one other thing we have to remember is that a firm can be a monopoly for a short period of time, but over time, and because of technological improvement, that monopoly can break up and be open to competition. Okay, basically the barriers to competition, when I am trying to use high cost, and there are certain advantages I have over the others, that can be for a short period of time, and that's because of advancements of technology and because of passage of time. What happens is, let's say if we look at the telecommunication industry in the 1980s and 1990s, AT&T was the only telecommunication provider in the industry, but now it has faced competition. Monopoly has broken down into an oligopoly market structure, right? We have other telecommunication companies as well in addition to AT&T. Previously it was AT&T, but with time, technology improved. Over time, the technology improved and other companies were able to enter the market, such as Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile. They entered into the market, and basically AT&T was subject to competition. Another example was the IBM. In the 1980s, IBM was the only company that was producing the desktop computers and the screens, right? But with technological improvements, more firms came in, Apple, Dell, Toshiba, all these firms came in and they were open to competition. So one thing to remember is, even though if a firm is operating in a monopoly market structure, over time, because of technological advancements, that monopoly can break up to form an oligopoly or monopolistic market structure. In this lecture, one last thing I want to cover is that the monopoly's demand curve is the same as the market demand for the product. Okay. A monopolist is a price setter. Basically, in a monopoly market structure, the supplier is the one who sets the price, who decides what the price is, right? Because they have influence over the price. There's no other competition. Consumers do not have any control over price. If I'm the leather jacket producer, I will be the one who will be setting my price, because there is no competition, there is no substitutes. So consumers do not have any control, but producers have. So I will be the price setter, but it will still operate. If I increase my price, probably out of the 30 of you, 10 of you will buy it. Okay, if I decrease my price, probably out of the 30 of you, 20 of you will buy. So it's the consumer's choice whether they want to buy it or not, depending on the price, but I will be the one deciding the price. But the normal price and demand behavior will still exist. So the demand curve will be the same as the market demand curve. Okay, so why I'm saying this is because if you remember, in a perfect competition, the demand curve is different for a market than the demand curve of a firm. If you remember, when we did this, let's say this is perfect competition, which we learned before the midterm, the demand curve for the market was downward sloping, and let's say this was the price, but for a firm, the demand curve was horizontal, if you remember, and that was the price. Okay, but under a monopoly, they are the same. The demand curve for the market is downward sloping, and the demand curve for the firm is also downward sloping. Okay, so that's the difference between perfect and monopoly competition. The demand curve for a single firm in a perfect competition is horizontal, and the demand curve for a single firm in a monopoly is downward sloping. It's exactly the same as the market demand curve. And also another thing to remember, which we will look into more in details in the next lecture, is that if you remember, for a perfect competition, the demand was equals to price equals to MR is equals to AR. So under the perfect competition, we had this scenario, but under a monopoly, we will have a different scenario. The demand curve is downward sloping, and the marginal revenue is not equal to the demand in this case. In this case, the marginal revenue will be half of the demand curve. Okay, it will be like this. So that's the demand curve, and that's the marginal revenue. And in next class, we will do an example to prove this and see how it operates. But for now, I will stop here. So I'm trying to keep the lecture short, but in the next class, I will finish lecture 12 and then I'll start lecture 13. Until then, if you have any questions, if you have any confusions, please feel free to email me. I try to respond to the emails as soon as possible. Or if you have any questions related to the midterm, you can also email me. But otherwise, we will continue from next week. You guys stay safe. Thank you very much.